Hello, welcome to FSCDR TV with Warriors Within. I'm your host, Coco. Here with this podcast, we like to make awareness about sickle cell anemia and bridge the gap between sickle cell warriors and our natural humans that we are, us. So this episode is a little special because I get to talk with a friend about sickle cell anemia. Um, the conversation sits differently, so you kind of are going to see a lot of more transparency and authenticity because it hits to home. It hits a lot of uncomfortable conversations. So my special guest, Servio, my good friend, how are you?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, and I thank you for having me.
It's always a good time every time we have a conversation. I feel like, let's just start off this conversation. How we met. It was, like I said, it was nothing but God-givenly and divine because Lord knows that it's hard to find sickle cell warriors around. And we always, we had this conversation before. Like, it's not like you just walk down the street and go like, hey, I'm a sickle cell person. And it's like you find them, you know what I'm saying?
True.
So I feel like if it wasn't for us meeting at our workplace and like really having that common denominator and God just bringing us totally together to have like a great conversation, even from when we first met and I was telling you, you need to dress warm. Like, you need to dress warm. Once you told me you were sickle cell anemic and I was just over how you were not warm inside our job, I was like, this not making no sense. I think my motherly instincts kicked in so, like, top tier for you. And ever since then, like, our conversations about sickle cell, the care for it, even like the advocacy, like when me and you talk about like, hey, what do you think, like when we bounce ideas off each other, what do you think we could make better? What do you do? I feel like our conversation really was different because when you told me you were sickle cell anemic, usually the stigma comes off as you're not black, or African American of descent. So that's why I remember the first time I asked you, I was like, what's your nationality? So I'm going to go ahead and dive into this part. What's your nationality?
I'm Dominican. My whole family is Dominican.
So are you the only person in your family with the sickle cell trait or with sickle cell anemia in general?
So my dad has the trait, and which if you look at him, you wouldn't even think that he has it. And my mom had the trait also.
And was like your family like aware of it or anything? Like, was it because most of the time, I feel like we had these conversations before. I've interviewed somebody that's from Jamaica, and in countries like that, it's not, the resources isn't fully accessible to know about these things. So, like, was your parents educated on it? How did they get educated on it?
Well, they weren't familiar with, that they had the trait, and they didn't even know what sickle cell anemia was. And sadly, that's like 95% of the time the story that parents would give people as far as like their kids having sickle cell anemia. And just like you said, in Jamaica, there's not enough resources to treat that type of condition or to even research it. That's the exact reason as to why my whole family, my dad and my mom, they moved to the United States because they found a doctor in Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken. That was the first state that we came in. And then we moved to New Jersey, who had the resources, who had the research and the medicine to be able to treat that condition.
So do you figure, did you ever do you have like cousins that have sickle cell that you could relate to? Like, were you the only one growing up in your family that was like, hey, I'm sickle cell anemic? So you really didn't have like a relatable source?
No, there was no family that had sickle cell trait. There was no family member, no friend or anything like that had that type of condition or dealt with something similar. I do say I did remember, even when we were talking earlier and like RJ said, you remember certain things and you just talk about certain experiences, and as you talk about them, you remember. I did remember that my dad, he has a friend that actually had sickle cell anemia, and that's actually the only person relatable that I knew. I went to DR one time for the summer, and they put me together with that person who was my dad's friend, who's now very successful, running a vitamin company for that same purpose, to treat that like a whole multivitamin, to provide the vitamins that we lack, to the patients.
So do you feel like when your family moved to the States, that's probably where they got more knowledge, more resources to help you, like aid you as a child to like with your sickle cell?
Yeah. And the reason for that was because when I would, like freeze up and, tense up or get very yellowish pigmentation, my dad said, he's not normal. There's something wrong with this kid. My parents would be crying. This is just a story I was told.
Yeah.
And they basically thought that I was going to die. So, it's just very hard to come to terms with that as a parent, especially like a new parent.
Yeah.
To come to terms that your son is going to die, like your first child, it's like, I can imagine that's horrifying.
Yeah, because you said, I tell you these stories about like me and my kids. So when I tell you like, yeah, for sure, it's not a good feeling.
Right.
So how did your parents have to adjust? Because they moved to a cold state first.
Yeah.
You said Pennsylvania, then New Jersey. Now you in Florida. Florida is a little bit more suitable weather for the condition. Mm-hmm. How did they manage with those two states before getting you here?
So I don't remember very well the transition, but I don't know the story of the transition very well. But they said that in Pennsylvania, that's where they met one doctor. In their research, they found one doctor that was able to treat the condition. So it's kind of like a risk, mm-hmm. because you're like, okay, this doctor can treat the condition, but we're going into the cold weather, so we're just gonna have to take a gamble, and we're gonna have to go in and get this treated, and then we'll reassess at that point what do we have to do or where we have to go. And then I guess they went to New Jersey because they found another doctor, and they found that I would say to be more prospering for I guess immigrants or people that just are starting a life in the U.S.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you feel like your parents had a lot of resources, like a lot of help, because me and you had this conversation, and I tell you all the time, my son has a lot of support. So I can only imagine if your family's moving from DR over to the States, they had to have minimal support. How do you remember if they had support? And if you don't, what do you have support?
So even taking out economic status out of the question, I think that even as a newborn parent with sickle cell anemia, you would have minimal support regardless. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how much money you have or family funds. Members. It's all about people and connections.
Yeah.
Because if you meet somebody that has that condition or has experienced that in some way, shape, or form, they can better guide you. But as a newborn parent, you don't know that you have the trait. You have no idea. You're just thrown into this.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how much money you have or whatever. It's very hard to have that type of support. So I would say that no, we didn't have much support. It's actually funny because my dad told me a story one time about like when we were walking in New Jersey. Long story short, it was one of my mom's friends. They were having a little bit of an issue, and then my dad told them off. And at around 3:00 in the morning, they were walking in the cold in New Jersey. Some guy just pulled up to the side. It was my dad, my mom, and me, and then my dad was carrying me. And then the guy just pulled up to the side of the road, and he's like, "Hey, I noticed you guys have a baby. I have a vacant apartment, but you guys have to be out by the morning because I have to rent it soon." Just thinking about that story.
Yeah.
It's like we didn't even have a place to live, let alone the type of support that is needed or the resources that is needed to be able to treat that condition effectively and efficiently, not at the bare minimum.
Yeah, for sure. Because I can only imagine, I'm putting myself in your parents' shoes, and I would be scared out my mind if I had to move from a whole nother country to the United States with my baby, don't know how to treat. I would be so a nervous wreck. So as growing up, when did you realize, like, I have sickle cell anemia, this isn't fun, I need to, like, when did you realize it? What was your first crisis like? Because that means at that point you were over here in the States, right?
Yes. The funny thing is, like, the last time that I have a recollection of a crisis was actually in Puerto Rico.
Wow.
And I just had, a very long, priapism. And and I just didn't know why. You know, it just lasted for a long time. I did hear about that years ago when I was in the hospital with my mom, but that was like over, that had to be over 5, 6, 7 years ago. You just hear the word, but you don't know what the meaning was.
Yeah.
So then, you know, it was hurting a lot. I didn't feel like anything was normal. Communication was very difficult with my dad at that point. And, you know, I just went in front of the room and I said, Dad, I don't feel good. And he's like, oh, you know, it was kind of like downplaying it. So I just took off the towel. He's like, what? You know, he's like, oh, we got to take you to a hospital. Hospital was the worst thing ever, because then, not that the treatment was bad, but when they determined that the episode lasted more than 4 hours, they had to basically put me under anesthesia, and they had to like drain the blood from and that was, when I woke up from the anesthesia, that was by far the most painful experience. So that was actually my first ever crisis. And then after that procedure was done, they had to do an IV. And I don't know, because this nurse, I don't know if she was new or she was in training, she had to poke me all around my arm, my hand, arm, this, like the entire, you know, just basically every limb, like on my leg and everything. And she's like, I don't know what's going on in your veins. We're not able to get it. It's like, I was going crazy.
Yeah.
Imagine getting poked every single like cubic centimeter of your skin. And then she was like, you know, at this point, I think we're going to have to shave your head. And we're going to have to, you know, put an IV through your head. And I'm like, no, you're not. You are not touching this hair. You know?
Yeah. No, that's crazy.
Yeah. No, it's.
So I can only. And how old were you when that happened?
I had to be like 10 or 11.
And so that probably sent you through a whole shock. Like, I never want to do this ever again at all.
Yeah, I'm like, what is this?
Yeah, because I can only imagine. Like, when I sit here and I vent to you and I tell you about things, like I said, when my son is going through, and you're able to tell me, hey, like, relax. Like, you completely dumb it down and break it down for me to understand what it's like to feel as a kid, 11-year-old kid at that.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a boy, for one, and I can't relate.
Right.
So a lot of things that, like I expressed to other warriors that we go through, we don't talk about things like with women, sickle cell women, we talk about menstrual cycles. Nobody knows how hard it is for a sickle cell woman to go through menstrual cycles. And then when me and you had a conversation with boys, the boys go through almost worse things the same way as women. You know, they don't talk about like the after effects on your body, because you're young. We had this conversation before too. So being young, you hang around younger people and you want to do everything that everybody does, the partying, the going out, the drinking. That's when you had this conversation. Like, you can't do that like that when you have sickle cell. You have to be so cautious. So as growing up, how did you realize, like, let's talk about this. What was your first outing like? Like going out, having fun, going out for drinks with your friends, and then boom, now I'm sick. I don't feel good. When did you realize, like, yo, I have to treat my body better, myself better, because sickle cell won't allow me to have the fun like that?
Right. So that had to be probably in around 2019, give or take 2018, 2019. I hang around with some friends and stuff, and I had this one friend that he would have parties in his house, and he would invite the group from high school, and I would just go, and I'll have a few drinks, and then the next morning I would have a private prison.
Yeah.
Or my heart would just be going very fast, very, very fast, which is the alcohol and the dehydration that it brings, that it causes you. That was probably my first experience, and I'm like, man, this is not easy, man. And it's actually also another day that I went out with some coworkers, and I had a few drinks also. Showed up at home at like 4 o'clock in the morning, woke up at like 12, 1 or 2, give or take. And my heart was going very fast. That was like it's mostly that. and then the priapism when it's an extreme case. But that's that's when I realized that it's not really that easy to just have those type, to have that type of fun, to have fun like how you want to, and then wake up the next day like it's nothing, with just like a hangover like most people do. And, that it's not just that I have to drink a whole bunch of water the next day. I have to hydrate. I have to make sure that I take my medicine to be able to restore my, normal heart rate, or worst case scenario would be a priapism. And then, at that point we're talking pain meds, like shower, things like that, and Sudafed, like I told you before, that is what I found to be the most helpful thing. But those are probably the two most significant experiences.
So I want to kind of go back to like your ethnicity on this one, because I remember asking you before. I'm like, so when you go to the hospital and you tell them that you're sickle cell anemic, do they look at you different?
Sometimes, yeah. And it's actually more common than you would want. I mean, we forgive those that are that 1% that they're having a bad day or whatever. They just don't know. But I would say probably three out of 5 times, they're just like, isn't that a African American condition, or isn't that like a black condition or something along the lines of that? I'm like, no, it's also Hispanic, and actually Asians, for your information. Like Asians, they have this condition too. Yeah. And Middle Eastern people too. It's a national condition. It's not even
just solidified to one.
Yeah. So, not only that, if that was just the first question, I wouldn't even have a problem. You understand? Yeah. But it's the matter of like being a young Hispanic person, not all the time you want to dress like this when you're going to the hospital.
Agreed.
To be able to get the respect that should have been given to you from the very beginning. For them to say, okay, he's in pain, let's give him, pain medication. Sometimes you just have tennis shoes and basketball shorts and a black T-shirt with a Clorox stain on it. Yeah. And that's the only thing that you could do, because you're in so much pain. You just don't have time to get dressed or whatever. And then you go there, and the nurses are figuring out whether you're a decent person in society or whatever, to be before giving you what you need as far as like medications and treatment is concerned.
So the reason why I ask is because I wanted to know, like, do you feel like it's kind of crazy to even say that they would even look at you differently just because? So do you feel like the misinterpretation, like it should be more? I mean, I know you're gonna tell me yes, because we already didn't have these conversations before. But do you feel like it needs to be more education wise on doctor and nurses in across the board about the range of sickle cell anemia?
Yes, but it doesn't stop there.
It doesn't.
I think government intervention is important, is essential, and I've done many events, and I've done several talks, and I've always said that government is important, because government is the one that they put the money out for the ads, for everything, For example, get tested for HIV before you have relations. Yeah. Another one that's famous: driving a little high is driving high. Driving a little or driving drunk or driving tipsy. Billboard ads. Yeah. Get tested for sickle cell anemia. I understand we're 3.5 million people on Earth, but if it's one person, that person still needs the help. You understand? Yeah. Because if you put yourself in the position of, if you didn't have this issue, if you didn't have this problem, and you're just completely isolated and your life is perfect, it's not important for you. It doesn't exist. It's not a problem, right? Yeah. But if you had the problem and your life is perfect and you have the funds, you're like, man, not only is this a problem for a loved one, but imagine all the people that are suffering to this. I have to do something about this. Yeah. But you don't have to be in somebody else's shoes to be able to want a change, to make a difference. You don't have to be given an example to make a difference, and government intervention is very important. Additional advertising and marketing is important. But I would say doctors is a very good place to start.
I do agree.
And education, like the education program in general.
I do agree, because like I said, we had these conversations before. testing is a really big thing, because remember we had this conversation like partners, even like with partners, you have to be careful, because I have the trait, and like we said, like you have to be careful of who you even engage with, because it's like, dang, even if it's like I like you a lot, I can't even like you no more, because it's like I don't want to be a doomsday to your life, seriously. But and it's kind of sad that you have to think of it as a person. So now I want to kind of flip it on this aspect, and then relationship wise, how do you feel like that affects like you? Because it's, again, like I can only imagine, like I said, the stigma that's put on sickle cell is that, one, like I said, it's a strictly African American disease. So I can only imagine by the time when, in a relationship, you met somebody and they're like, and you're explaining to them, this is what I have. And they're like, but wait a minute, this is only for, how you, the questions and the protocols. So how, in a relationship, was it trials, was it tribulations? Is it hard to elaborate or explain to some, or have you had past relationships it was hard to explain to any of them, like, yes, this is my condition, I'm not the only one that goes through it, let me educate you furthermore, so then that way, if the full knowledge. Is it difficult? Is it different?
Well, when it comes to people that you meet on the street, or people in your life that doesn't have a medical background, I get it. There's myths, there's misunderstandings, there's just general stereotypes of things, and I don't really get offended or anything like that. And I do explain it in the basic and the most basic way, what the condition is and how does it affect you and who does it affect. I don't have an issue. I've never had an issue with explaining that to anybody. The one that they have the bar is like pretty high is the nurse, the medical practitioners. You need to know your stuff. You know?
For sure.
So they're the ones that you're just like, dude, we're not going to get into this.
Yeah, because we had a conversation about this before. Like sometimes they'll walk in, you got sickle cell? Excuse me, does my chart not say this? Like we didn't have this conversation before. So it's like, how are you not aware if you are the doctor treating me of what I got going on?
Yeah.
So when we talk about more so awareness, and like we said, start with doctors, you said start with government infrastructure for sure. Those are big things to tackle, because it's a disease that's not spoken about a lot. So of course we would never get the funding for it like we would for any other disease. How do you think we can make more awareness to the government, or what can you expect in the near future for us to make, like as a community? What do you think ideas, output? Because me and you talk about stuff like this, that we can make more awareness to the government to start allocating more funding. We could start making more implements within the community, because there are people that are sickle cell anemic, like we talked about, like even with my son, they need friends. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, those are resources. Like we talk about schooling, that's government funding to stuff like that. Kids that have other diseases, they have funding for schools too. So let's talk about that. How do you think we can make awareness to that, or bring more funds in for that?
I think authoritative figures are needed. I think doctors, you need to have like doctors on your side that, and you need to have doctors on your side that they are aware of these topics, are aware of the necessity and the deficiencies in that particular area, and also a lot of people, and being able to make a lot of noise too.
Yeah, because you got to make a lot.
I think, petitions are very important too. I've seen petitions being effective from time to time, depending on what it is. And I've actually seen people succeed in passing legislation relating to sickle cell anemia.
Yeah, same. So do you think like, because right now we talk about the Foundation of Sickle Cell Research and Disease, and they help out immensely with, sickle cell anemia, the awareness, the outreach of it. And what do you think about having more centers like that? Because like I said, the Foundation of Sickle Cell Research and Disease is one of them, just one. And that's the only one in Florida. And we haven't talked about how they're branching out elsewhere. What do you think about that being all over the place? Because if you think about it, it needs to be, that's making awareness, like you said, making noise everywhere. where do you feel like we could implement us starting that? Where could a change go?
Taking into consideration that it is understood to be an predominantly African American condition, or just an African American condition, I think in other markets, like in other type of Hispanic population,
Yeah.
Latin American populations, and internationally, of course, is a very good place. But it's just too much funding at that point. But in Latin American markets, it's very important to expand on that because of the misunderstanding and the lack of knowledge. And another great idea would be bringing out the ones that are not mentioned in these conversations, which are Middle Eastern people and Asians.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm Hispanic, right, and I get that reaction, imagine what an Asian or Middle Eastern person would get.
Yeah, agreed.
Instead, I think it would actually even be a crazier reaction, like a crazier response. You understand?
Yeah.
And hearing that from a doctor, nurse practitioner, etc., that's not the most inspiring thing as far as like your medical treatment is concerned.
For sure.
It's funny because I actually went to the hospital one time, and I just wasn't feeling well. And then the one of the nurses, when they were doing the vitals and things like that, he was Asian, and then he put an oxygen meter, and then he saw like the oxygen saturation was lower than usual, and he just looks at it and he's like, "You have sickle cell anemia?" And I was like, I was in shock. I was like, "Yes, how do you know?" He was like, "Oh, I have it too." And I was like, "What?" That was even crazier. And he's like, "Yeah, got to take care of yourself. Take your vitamins, your medicine, vegetables, things like that." And I've never forgotten that experience.
Yeah, because that's what he talked about. We had that conversation, like, you don't look like a sickle cell anemia person. And like, I think that's why when we met and you told me that, I was like, oh yeah, we gotta talk. Like this, not that the stereotype fits. It's just that you don't, like you said, you don't know. When you get to talking to people, people look at you and be like, oh, you're healthy. Nothing's wrong with you. But God, they don't know, like I said, like how when I was getting on you at work, put on a jacket. They don't know, yeah, you look fine, but God forbid if it's 60 degrees in this building and you don't have on a jacket and you leave out of here, you're not okay.
Right.
And that's the consideration of certain scenarios that I agree with you. It has to, like, that stigma has to be dropped, and it has to be more awareness on other things as well.
I agree. Yeah, the in consideration, we have to take care of the machines. We have to keep the building at 60 degrees for the machines,
Exactly. Forget the people. Forget the people.
That's basically the mentality that I see.
So what made you want to get be more of an advocate? Because being in a different ethnicity and everything else, that has to be like kind of hard, considering the fact, like, hey, I'm just one person. You know what I'm saying? Like, what made you want to say, like, hey, this is me, and I need to make awareness, not just for myself, for my people, and everything else. So, yeah, what made you want to be such an advocate and make awareness into the sickle cell community?
I'm a very observant person, and just things, they really stick with me. I just don't, there's a lot of things that I just don't look at it like, oh, that's nothing, and just keep going. So I just make note of like a lot of experiences, the most defining experiences. And I've come to the realization that I'm definitely not the only one. And this is not even a guess. This is an absolute certainty.
For sure.
And I'm not the only one. And just going through the experience of like going through, adolescence, going through young adulthood, and, the next chapter of my life, just being an adult and whatnot, that's to come. But looking at all those experiences from childhood up to today, it's not going to take long for you to say, if you were in that experience, it wouldn't take long for you to say, there's something wrong. Yeah. In like the upbringing, in you know, the adolescent years, there was always something wrong. There was always something missing. And sickle cell anemia was not it.
Yeah.
You know, sickle cell anemia was just a problem that I had that it's just going to be in my life forever.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly, there's another problem that is external that is causing bigger issues in the underlying condition, and that had to be, you know, obviously support from family members, friends, and also education and medical support also, because when you realize that there's a lot of people, when you go through all these obstacles, that there's a lot of people that should know but they don't know, and my dad helping me out, you know, just being a parent, trying to figure out my comorbidity, because my heart rate was going over 100, over 110, over 120, you know, and constantly.
Yeah, that's bad.
You know, he would take me to cardiologists, like, hey, what's going on with him? His heart rate is very elevated. That is not normal. He has sickle cell anemia, but I just don't know what's going on. They couldn't diagnose me originally in Puerto Rico. They ended up diagnosing me when I had a crisis here in Miami.
How old were you then?
I was about 20, 22 when my other condition was discovered. And just thinking about those experiences, you know, I went to the Foundation for Sickle Cell Disease Research. And, you know, Dr. Bronte, she said, hey, I have something that you might be interested in. You know, I went to Washington. That was my first experience.
Shout out Dr. Bronte.
Yeah. And then that was my first experience. And then I realized, I'm like, you know, this might help some people. And then people started reaching out to me. And then when I really, like, in one of those cohorts, seminars, etc., it really hit me. I'm like, man, this is really impactful.
Yeah.
I want to go 10 times harder.
Yeah. I
want to do this even more. If anybody reaches out to me, I'm not going to say no.
Yeah.
So that's what really made me, like, devoted, and especially meeting people, like you said, you know, that they could go the entire lives getting misdiagnosed, not knowing they have sickle cell anemia, or that, you know, like mothers that they don't know what's going on with their son, or their sons go to the hospital and the doctors are not doing a good job, or they're not explaining to them. Yeah. They're doing a good job. They're just not explaining what they're doing. And you see a situation like that, it's like, you don't want other people to go through that. Yeah. Especially when you know that. Yeah. You know, they say the best way for you to learn is to learn from other people's mistakes.
It's true.
Because you don't go through it. So if that's the case, if you're just living through other people's experience and something that is needed for you to run, it's preferred for you to live in other people's experience, I just realized that if everybody could tell their story, everybody can help each other. Yeah. That's how we're making this happen so far. Yeah. So the way that I also think about it is, there's things in life that you can't live on other people's experience. Mm-hmm. Like sometimes, you know, relationships in certain situations, career decisions, you know, business decisions, you just can't look at somebody else's experience and say, oh, I can't do that. That's too risky. You just have to go and take it. But when it comes to health and life and just overall quality of life and just lifestyle in general, mm-hmm. research, opinions, stories, and information is the best thing that you can live by. Yeah, for sure. So you don't have to. So you could just know what to do when you're moving forward. Because
when we had a conversation, and you were like telling me like, you like sickle cell is a science, and I swear when you said that to me, it stuck with me, and I was like, he's right. If you don't do your research on everything, like when we had that conversation when I was talking about my son. Yeah. From that day on, even things like you were telling me about, like with medications and certain like regimens to do, I was like, he's so absolutely right. If you don't know, you have to look it up, because the doctors are going to give you the politically correct way, the doctor terminology that's going to fly over your head. And it's like, when you're sitting there, like I said, when me and you had the conversation, I swear that's something like, it's great to have community like that, like how you said, because
Yeah.
God knows if I would have went. Imagine if I would have came to work that day and you weren't there, and I was just lost as ever.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for you sitting there telling me, "Hey, relax. I've been through the same thing. This is what it's gonna like. This is the process for real. Like it's gonna happen like that." If you don't have that like support or at least a mentor or guidance to kind of like, hey, uplift you and push you through, because even Dr. Bronte does the same thing for me too. Like, I can call her anytime or text her, Dr. Bronte, please call me, da-da-da-da-da. And it's the support of like you, her, my mom, everybody else, because if I don't know, somebody's going to look it up and tell me. And it's appreciated. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I totally agree with you about being more active with it, because you have to team together within the community, because I don't have it. I don't have sickle cell anemia. Like I said, I don't have the trait. But like I told you, I go hard for sickle cell anemia and anybody with the trait, because I wouldn't want the next woman to have to see, like how I told you. I'm like, I would hate for somebody to have to grow up like how I did and I didn't know. Like, that is a really hard battle to know. That's why when you just say your parents didn't know something was wrong with you, that is the scariest feeling. Like I told you, to like look at your kid and be like, I cannot do nothing for him. Like, I can't help you, I can't hug you, I can't kiss you, I can't defeating. Nothing. It's so defeating. So to like close us out and everything, I want you to tell me, as in, because I think that you are just the smartest, brilliantest sickle cell warrior I have ever met. I'm gonna be for real. You come with so much knowledge, and I like talking to you, because if I don't know, you gonna go look it up. And I like that, because I like sometimes I may not be looking up the right things.
Yeah.
So I like talking to you, because if the information ain't correct, you will show me. Like, even when you showed me, like, hey, look at my doctor papers. Like, this is what you should look for.
Yeah.
Further down your life, where do you see you being a big advocacy for sickle cell, and how do you wish to make a better impact on sickle cell and all your warriors?
I eventually want to do something for sickle cell, awareness. It would definitely be a nonprofit organization, but I haven't singled out what the main issue is, like how to make it different. But definitely the funding is a big question, and if it has to be self-funded, I mean, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, gotta start somewhere.
But yeah, I think more organizations should be out there doing their own thing in their own way, doing their own advertising, doing their own marketing. Some of them, they go to Latin American countries. Others, they go locally. Some send flyers. Some put ads on the internet. So just bringing in your own unique mix into this entire stage is I think that's basically what I see myself doing, further down the line.
Yeah.
Mentioned.
And trust me, I see you doing it too. I'm being for real. I see so much gateways and doors like that you like I said, you have to open and spread so much knowledge. Like, your advocacy is needed. I'm gonna let you know that.
Yeah.
It's very much so needed. And I'm so thankful that you came on my show today, on the show today at all, and you decided to sit down and talk, and you decided to sit down and share some more information with me. It's always good having these good conversations with you, and I just want you to stay strong and just keep making more, like you said, keep making more noise, because we're not done yet. We're not done yet.
We're far from done. This is just the beginning.
Exactly. It's just the beginning. So thank you, Servio, and that is actually the end of our episode. Thank you.